The moment my stepson accidentally called me mom in front of his birth mother, I thought I was witnessing an awkward family moment. I was wrong. Within days I was accused of turning him against his own mother. Then I discovered forged documents, a hidden inheritance, and a secret my husband had kept from me for years. And just when I thought I knew who was behind it all, someone used my husband's voice to threaten me. If you were in my position, would you stay and fight, or walk away? Watch until the end and tell me in the comments. Would you trust your husband after discovering he hid the truth about his mother's death? Subscribe for more intense family betrayal stories, unexpected twists, and justice that never comes easy. I knew something was wrong the moment my stepson called me mom, in front of his birth mother. Not because the word embarrassed me. Because Seraphine Voss stopped breathing for a second. My name is Alessia Karimi. I was 36, worked restoring historic houses around Providence, and had been married to Dorian Vale for 4 years. Dorian had a 15-year-old son, Nico, from his first marriage. Nico was quiet with strangers, funny when he trusted you, and obsessed with vintage cameras. I had never asked him to call me mom. That Saturday afternoon, we were having lunch at a restaurant in downtown Providence. Rain tapped against the windows while Dorian talked about a contractor. Nico was showing me photographs from his film camera. He reached toward the empty space beside his plate. Mom, can you pass the napkins? My hand stopped. Dorian stopped talking. Nico looked up, his face pale. I meant Alessia. Across the table, Seraphine slowly put down her glass. She had arrived 20 minutes earlier without warning. Dorian had said she wanted to see Nico while she was in town. Excuse me, she asked. Nico stared at his plate. Seraphine looked at me. How long has that been happening? It hasn't, I said. He just called you mom. He made a mistake. A mistake. Dorian leaned forward. Seraphine, don't start. He turned to Nico. Did Alessia tell you to call her that? No. The answer came too quickly. Seraphine noticed. So you decided that yourself? Nico shifted in his chair. I said it by accident. She laughed once. Accidents usually happen once. Seraphine, I have never asked Nico to call me anything. Then why did he? I don't know. She pushed her chair back. I need to speak with my son. Not here, Dorian said. She stared at him. You have no idea what you've allowed to happen in this house. Then she walked outside. Nico didn't touch his food again. On the drive home, he sat in the back seat with his camera pressed against his chest. After several minutes, he said, I'm sorry. I turned around. You didn't do anything wrong. I shouldn't have said it. You don't have to apologize for a word. He looked out the window. She hates you. Dorian glanced at him. She doesn't hate Alessia. Nico gave a short laugh. Yes, she does. When we reached home, I found Nico upstairs sorting photographs. Can I come in? He nodded. I sat beside him. Why did you call me mom? He kept his eyes down. I don't know. Nico. He sighed. Sometimes I think it. You're the person who takes me to school when Dad has meetings. You know when I have tests. You know which batteries my camera needs. You stayed up with me when I was sick. He shrugged. I guess my brain just said it. My throat tightened. You never have to feel bad about loving me. I don't want Mom to think I don't love her. You can love her. And me too. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen and went still. What is it? He handed me the phone. A message from Seraphine read. We need to talk about Alessia. Don't tell your father yet. A second message appeared. This is important. You may have to choose where you live. I looked at Nico. He was already crying. Why would she say that? I don't know. That night, Dorian and I sat in the kitchen after Nico went to bed. She has done this before, Dorian said. What do you mean? Whenever she feels she's losing control, she turns something small into a crisis. I hope so. Then his phone rang. Dorian answered, listened, and went pale. What happened? I asked. He ended the call. Seraphine filed an emergency request with the family court. My stomach dropped. For what? Temporary custody. Because Nico called me mom? Dorian shook his head. No. She is accusing you of something much bigger. The next morning we drove to Dorian's attorney's office. Her name was Priya Sondi. She was precise and direct. She read Seraphine's filing without interrupting us. When she finished, she removed her glasses. This isn't a normal custody complaint. What is she claiming? I asked. She claims you've been deliberately replacing her as Nico's mother. I haven't. I believe you. Priya turned the page. She also claims Nico has been pressured into rejecting her. There is something else. She showed us an attached report from a child psychologist. According to it, Nico had supposedly told the psychologist that Seraphine made him afraid and that Alessia was the only person he trusted. Nico never saw this psychologist. Priya looked at me. Are you certain? Yes. Then we have a serious problem. Before we could continue, her assistant entered with a large envelope. No return address. Dorian opened it. Inside was a photograph of Nico outside Northlight Studio, his grandmother's photography warehouse. Beside him stood Calder Rusk. I had never met him. Dorian's face went still. Who is that? My mother's former business manager. Why is he with Nico? I don't know. Priya took the photograph. On the back was a handwritten sentence. Ask why Nico was brought to Northlight 3 weeks before Seraphine came back. Dorian looked at me. Nico told us he had never been there. 2 weeks earlier, Nico had asked whether his grandmother still owned the studio. I had assumed it was a school question. Now I wasn't so sure. Priya turned the photograph over. There is another issue. She pointed to a black SUV in the background. Dorian recognized it immediately. That belongs to Seraphine. Nico hadn't just been near the studio. Seraphine had been watching. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been waiting for us to notice Northlight. Priya placed the photograph in a clear folder. Don't contact Seraphine or Calder, she said. If someone is using Nico as leverage, every piece of information matters. What if Nico already knows more than we do? I asked. Priya looked at me. Then find out before they do. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. Stop looking into Northlight, Alessia. You have no idea what Nico inherited. Then another message arrived. If you keep digging, the custody case will be the least of your problems. The handwriting looked exactly like Alohan's. But the document beneath the photograph was not a will or deed. It was a letter addressed to Nico. Dorian reached for the phone. Wait, I said. I zoomed in again. At the bottom, beneath Alohan's signature were 5 words. If they come for Northlight, trust Alessia. I stared at the screen. What does that mean? Dorian asked. She knew something would happen. I didn't know her. Nico looked between us. Maybe she knew you would be the one who stayed. The sentence unsettled me. We took the photograph to Priya. She enlarged it on her monitor. There was more writing beneath the visible section, but most of it was blocked by the notebook. Priya looked at Nico. Do you still have the notebook? Yes. Then we need to compare the paper. An hour later we were back at Northlight. Elias had permission to enter as trustee, so we searched the old records room carefully. Nico opened the notebook. Then the handwriting changed just enough for Priya to notice. This isn't Alohan. Dorian leaned closer. Whose is it? We don't know. The unfamiliar handwriting appeared beside several dates. 3 years ago. 2 years ago. Then 6 months before Alohan died. One sentence was circled. Seraphine believes the trust belongs to her. Another read. Calder has debts he cannot disclose. Then, Dorian knows part of the truth. I looked at my husband. What does that mean? I don't know, he said. Nico turned the page. A final note was in Alohan's handwriting. If Dorian is ever forced to choose between his wife and his son, he must choose Nico. Dorian stepped back. She knew. Knew what? I asked. That I would marry you. I stared at him. She died before we met. Exactly. Priya said. Then it was written for whoever would become part of Nico's life. Alohan had planned for a future she would never see. That afternoon we returned to Priya's office. She placed every document across the conference table. The forged declaration. The trust agreement. The old police report. The photograph of Seraphine and Calder. The note from Alohan. Then she said, we're looking at 2 separate schemes. Dorian frowned. 2. Calder wanted control of Northlight because of his debt. Seraphine helped him. But someone else has been manufacturing evidence against Alessia. I looked at her. You think Seraphine isn't behind all of it? I think she's involved. I don't think she's the architect. Who would benefit from making me look guilty? Priya pointed to the forged psychological report. Someone who needs Nico separated from you. Why? Because the court has to doubt Nico's testimony before his 16th birthday. I looked at her. If they discredit him, they can challenge the trust. Yes. Then his phone rang. Seraphine. Nico looked at me. Should I answer? Priya nodded. Put it on speaker. Nico answered. Hello. Seraphine's voice was quiet. Are you with Alessia? Yes. Good. Dorian leaned forward. What do you want? I want to see my son. You can see him when the attorney approves it. I don't need permission from you. Priya signaled for Dorian to stay silent. Seraphine continued. Nico, I need you to listen carefully. Your grandmother left something for you. Nico frowned. A key. To what? The old community center. Dorian stood. Seraphine said, Do you remember the woman in the red coat? Nico's face changed. Yes. She has it. The call ended. Elias suddenly looked at Priya. I do. We turned toward him. She was a Lowen's attorney. Dorian stared. What was her name? Maribel Quaid. Priya searched the name. She died 2 years ago. Then who has the key? Elias looked at the photograph from Northlight. The person who inherited her files. We found the darkroom behind a storage wall. There was a metal cabinet. Inside was a single envelope. Nico opened it. A brass key fell into his hand. There was a note. Not from Lowen. From Maribel. Nico, if you are reading this, Lowen's plan worked. Do not give this key to Seraphine. Do not give it to Calder. And do not let anyone convince you that Alessia is your enemy. I looked at Nico. He looked at me. Then he turned the note over. The truth is in locker 418. I remembered the storage facility. The same place where we had already found Lowen's records. But when we arrived, the manager told us locker 418 had been emptied that morning. Who emptied it? Priya asked. He checked the computer. A woman. What woman? She gave the name Leora Venn. My stomach dropped. Leora had stolen the notary seal. Leora had been photographed with Calder. And now she had taken the only remaining evidence. We asked for the security footage. The manager pulled it up. At 10:42 a.m., Leora entered the facility. At 10:51, Seraphine arrived. At 11:03, Calder arrived. At 11:17, Leora left carrying a black case. But at 11:20, someone else entered the building. A man. He wore a baseball cap and kept his face down. He walked directly to locker 418. The manager paused the footage. Dorian leaned closer. I know him. Who? Dorian's face went white. That was my brother. I stared at him. You have a brother? I did. What does that mean? He died when I was 18. Nobody spoke. Dorian watched the frozen image. That can't be him. Priya looked at the timestamp. Then someone wants you to believe it is. She zoomed in. The man's face remained hidden. But his jacket had a small stitched emblem. A black compass. Elias recognized it. That was Lowen's private investigation group. Dorian whispered, My mother had an investigation group? Elias nodded. She wasn't only investigating Calder. He looked at Nico. She was investigating someone inside the Vale family. Then the lights in the storage facility went out. A door slammed somewhere behind us. Nico grabbed my hand. We heard footsteps approaching. And then a man's voice came through the darkness. Alessia, if you want Nico to stay safe, don't open locker 418. The voice was familiar. It was Dorian's. The next page was missing. I stood in the darkroom with Nico's grandmother's notebook in my hands. Several sheets had been ripped out. Whoever entered Northlight knew exactly what they wanted. And they had been there minutes before us. I was 36, married to Dorian Vale for 4 years, and had spent those years learning how to be Nico's stepmother without trying to replace his birth mother. I was discovering how little I knew about the family I had married into. Dorian locked the studio door while Priya called the police. Nico stayed beside me, gripping the notebook. Do you think Mom took the pages? I don't know. You know. I know she was here. That's different. 10 minutes later, an officer arrived and inspected the building. There was no forced entry or useful fingerprint. Someone had used a key. On the drive home, Nico barely spoke. Then he said, "I remember something else." Dorian looked into the rearview mirror. "What?" "Calder didn't bring those papers to Northlight." I turned around. "What do you mean?" "He told Mom they were already there." Dorian's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Did you see anyone else that day?" Nico hesitated. "A woman." "What woman?" "I don't know her." "What did she look like?" "Gray hair. Red coat. She was arguing with Mom." "Did you hear what they said?" Nico nodded. "The woman said, 'If you touch that trust, Eloan's lawyer will expose everything.'" Priya turned around. "Did she say the lawyer's name?" Nico closed his eyes, trying to remember. "Elias." Priya went silent. "Elias Merritt?" "I think so." Priya immediately took out her phone. "I know him. He's the independent trustee for several Vale family assets." Dorian looked confused. "My mother never mentioned a trustee." "She may not have mentioned him to you," Priya said. The next morning we met Elias at a Providence coffee shop. He listened while Priya explained what we had found. Then he looked at Nico. "Did your grandmother ever tell you not to trust anyone who asked about Northlight?" Nico nodded. "She did." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. "I was afraid of this." Dorian leaned forward. "Afraid of what?" Elias opened his case. Inside was a copy of Eloan's original trust agreement. The property was never supposed to be controlled by Dorian. Dorian stared at him. "What?" "Your mother established the trust 6 months before she died. Nico became the beneficiary." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother instructed me not to." Dorian looked stunned. "She was my mother. She was also a woman who believed you would be pressured." "By whom?" "By people who needed Northlight outside the trust." I asked, "What people?" He slid another document across the table. It was a transfer request. The signature belonged to Nico. Except Nico had been 12 when it was supposedly signed. He stared at it. "I didn't sign that." "I know," Elias said. Dorian looked at the date. "This was filed 3 years ago." "That was the first attempt." Elias nodded. "There were 2 more." "Who submitted them?" Elias pointed to the company name. Boss Meridian Holdings. Seraphine's family business. Dorian pushed his chair back. "So she has been trying to take Northlight for 3 years." "Not exactly," Elias said. "The company wasn't trying to take ownership." He turned the document over. "They were trying to obtain management rights." Priya read the clause. "If management rights are transferred, the trust's assets can be used as collateral." Dorian stared at the page. "That would let them borrow against it." "Yes." "And if they default?" "Northlight could be sold." I looked at Nico. He understood immediately. "That means they could lose Grandma's studio." Elias nodded. "Unless the trust is protected." "Is it?" I asked. He looked at me. "Not if someone succeeds in convincing the court that Nico is being manipulated." The custody case wasn't the main objective. If Seraphine could make the court question Nico's relationship with me, she could create the instability required to challenge the trust's management. But Priya suddenly frowned. "There's a problem." "What?" "If Seraphine has been trying this for 3 years, why did she wait until now?" Elias looked at Nico. "Because he recently became old enough to make a declaration about the trust." Nico blinked. "When?" 2 months ago." I looked at Dorian. That was when Seraphine had suddenly started visiting again. It wasn't coincidence. Then Elias said something that changed everything. "Your grandmother left another condition." "What condition?" Dorian asked. "Nico must personally reject any attempt to transfer Northlight." Nico looked confused. "How do I do that?" "By signing a declaration." "When?" "Before your 16th birthday." Nico's birthday was less than 6 weeks away. Priya immediately understood. "So that's the deadline." Elias nodded. "If it isn't filed before then, the trustee can be petitioned to review the arrangement." Dorian stood. "Then we file it today." Elias shook his head. "We can't." "Why?" "Because someone already filed a competing declaration." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small. Dorian stared at him. Whose? Elias looked directly at Nico. Yours. Nico's face went white. I never signed anything. I know. Elias opened his case again. This is why I contacted you. He handed Priya a certified copy. The document carried Nico's name, his supposed signature, and a witness stamp. Priya studied it. Who was the witness? Elias pointed to the bottom. I read the name. My heart dropped. The witness was Dr. Mara Bell, the same examiner who had reviewed the forged paper for us. Dorian whispered, that can't be possible. Priya looked at me. It can if someone wanted us to trust her. I thought about the woman in the red coat, the missing pages, and the forged signature. Then I remembered Mara had never asked to see Nico's identification. I called her. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. My hands were shaking. Then a message appeared. Not from Mara. From Seraphine. You should have left Northlight alone. A second message followed. I warned you what would happen if you kept digging. Then came the sentence that made me stop breathing. Ask your husband why he never told you what happened the night his mother died. The message stayed on my screen long after the phone stopped vibrating. I read it again. Stop looking into Northlight, Alessia. You have no idea what Nico inherited. Then the second line. If you keep digging, the custody case will be the least of your problems. I wanted to believe it was a bluff. By Monday morning I knew it wasn't. My name is Alessia Karimi, and until that weekend, my biggest concern had been whether a century-old staircase could be restored without destroying the original wood. Now I was sitting in Priya Sondi's office, staring at a photograph of my 15-year-old stepson beside a man who had every reason to want something from him. Priya placed the phone face down. Don't respond. I wasn't going to. Dorian sat beside me, tense and exhausted. He had barely slept. What exactly is Northlight? I asked. He rubbed his forehead. My mother owned it. No. I mean, she owned more than the building. Northlight was her business. Dorian explained that Aloan Vale had been a documentary photographer. After her death, the studio was supposed to be sold, and the proceeds divided according to her estate plan. Supposed to be? Dorian nodded. The sale never happened. Why? Because my mother changed the trust shortly before she died. Priya looked up. What did she change? Dorian hesitated. I don't know. Priya opened a file. Then we need the original estate documents. We were at the county records office shortly afterward. Finally, a clerk printed a property record. Northlight Studio was still listed under the name of the Aloan Vale Family Trust. Dorian frowned. Who's the beneficiary? The clerk pointed to the document. Nico Vale. I looked at Dorian. He looked just as surprised. How much is the property worth? I asked. The clerk gave us a figure. I stared at the number. It was over $3 million. Dorian sat down. That can't be right. Priya took the paper. It can. The clerk added, there are several liens listed as pending. What kind of liens? He checked. That's strange. What? The liens were filed by companies that don't appear to own the property. Priya immediately photographed the records. On the way out, Dorian stopped me. This is why Seraphine came back. Maybe. You don't believe that? I think we're missing something. That afternoon, Nico came home from school and found us waiting in the kitchen. He looked at our faces. What happened? I decided not to lie. We found out Northlight belongs to your trust. He went quiet. My grandmother's studio? Yes. I thought Dad owned it. So did I, Dorian said. Nico sat down. Does Mom know? Before Dorian could answer, his phone rang. Seraphine. He put it on speaker. Her voice was calm. I assume you've discovered Northlight. Dorian stiffened. How did you know? Because I know my own family. Priya gestured for him to keep her talking. Seraphine continued. Nico has a right to know what belongs to him. You filed for custody, Dorian said. Why? Because I'm concerned about his relationship with Alessia. You mean you're concerned about the studio? There was silence. Then Seraphine said, you always were bad at seeing the bigger picture. The call ended. Nico stared at the phone. Why does she care about the studio? Nobody answered. That night I found Nico in the garage. He was cleaning an old camera. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Why were you at Northlight with Calder? He stopped moving. I wasn't. We have a photograph. His face changed. Where did you get it? Someone sent it. He put the camera down. Dad told me never to talk about that. My stomach tightened. Why? Because Mom said it would make things worse. What happened there? Nico looked toward the garage door. Calder wanted me to sign something. What? I don't know. Some papers. Did you sign them? No. Why not? Because Grandma's handwriting was on the first page, but the rest didn't look like hers. I sat down. What did Calder say? He said it was just permission for him to manage the studio until I was 18. Did your father know? Nico shook his head. I told Mom. And she told you to keep quiet? Yes. I had spent 4 years learning Nico's habits, but that afternoon I realized there were parts of his life I had never been allowed to see. It wasn't only Seraphine who had kept secrets. Dorian had too, and that frightened me almost as much as the anonymous threats. The next morning, Priya arranged for a forensic document examiner to review the papers Nico remembered. The examiner's name was Dr. Mara Bell. She worked from a small office in Hartford, surrounded by scanners, magnifying lamps and old files. After 20 minutes she looked at Priya. The signature is authentic. Dorian exhaled. Then Mara added, but the page was removed from another document. What does that mean? I asked. The signature belongs to Eloan Vale. The text around it was added later. Dorian stared at her. Someone cut her signature from an old document and placed it on a new one. Mara nodded. So it was forged. She pointed to the page. Someone manufactured a document that could survive a basic review. Priya leaned closer. Who would have access to Eloan's originals? Mara gave us a list of possibilities. Family, employees, estate attorneys, or someone who had handled the studio records after Eloan died. Calder Rusk. That afternoon we drove to Northlight. The building looked worse in daylight. Broken blinds covered the upper windows. The front lock had been replaced recently. Dorian tried his old key. It didn't work. That's new, he said. We walked around the side. One window was partially open. Inside, the studio smelled of dust and damp paper. Nico immediately moved toward a wall of filing cabinets. Grandma kept her negatives here. He opened a drawer. Another. Then he stopped. Someone cleaned this out. Priya examined the floor. Fresh shoe marks crossed the dust. Recently. Dorian looked at me. We weren't the first people here. Nico walked toward the darkroom. A moment later we heard him shout. I ran after him. He was standing beside a metal cabinet. The door was open. Inside was a small black notebook. He picked it up. This is Grandma's. Then I saw one sentence underlined twice. The message from Seraphine changed the way I looked at my husband. Ask your husband why he never told you what happened the night his mother died. For 4 years I had believed Dorian's silence was grief. Now I wondered if it was guilt. I turned the phone toward him. What happened the night your mother died? Dorian went completely still. Priya watched him carefully. Dorian. He looked at Nico, then at me. My mother wasn't alone. That isn't an answer. I know. Then give me one. He lowered his eyes. The night she died she called me 3 times. Why? She said someone had entered Northlight. Nico stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought it was a burglary. Did you go there? Yes. The room went silent. When? About 40 minutes after she called. I felt cold. What did you see? Nothing at first. The door was open. Papers were everywhere. My mother was inside. Was she alive? Yes. Dorian's voice cracked. She was conscious when I found her. I stared at him. You said she died at the hospital. She did. What did she tell you? Dorian swallowed. She said, don't let them use Nico. Priya leaned forward. Who was them? I asked her. She couldn't answer. You didn't tell the police? I did. Then why isn't this in the report? Because I was 29 and terrified. I thought I had misunderstood her. Nico stood. You kept this from me for years. I was trying to protect you. You kept me from knowing her. Dorian looked shattered. Before he could answer, Elias interrupted. There's another problem. He opened the trust file. The police report was altered. Priya took the pages. Where? The original report says officers found evidence of forced entry. She looked up. This copy says there was no evidence of forced entry. Exactly. I felt my pulse rise. Who changed it? Elias pointed to a signature. The investigating officer. Priya photographed the page. Where is he now? Retired. His name is Jonas Vale. Dorian frowned. No relation to us. We searched old records. Jonas had become a private security consultant after retiring. By noon we were outside his house. An older man answered the door. When Priya showed him the report, he didn't deny changing it. I was ordered to. By whom? Jonas looked at Dorian. Your mother asked me to. Dorian stared. Why would she? Because she believed the person who entered Northlight was someone she knew. Who? Jonas shook his head. She wouldn't tell me. Then why alter the report? She said if the truth came out too early, Nico would become a target. I asked, did you know about the trust? Jonas looked at me. Yes. Who else knew? He hesitated. Seraphine. That answer hit harder than I expected. Dorian asked, was she there that night? Jonas looked away. I saw her car. Dorian's face went pale. Jonas nodded. But she wasn't alone. My stomach tightened. Who was with her? Jonas walked into his study and returned with an old photograph. He handed it to me. It showed Seraphine standing outside Northlight beside Calder Rusk. The date was the night Aloan died. I looked at Dorian. He had gone pale. I never saw this. Jonas said, because I was told to keep it. By whom? He looked directly at Dorian. Your mother. That made no sense. Why would Aloan protect Seraphine? Jonas didn't answer. Instead he said, because Seraphine wasn't the person she was protecting. Then who? Nico. On the drive back to Providence nobody spoke. When we reached the house, Nico went upstairs. Dorian stayed in the kitchen. You knew Seraphine was there, I said. I suspected. You knew she had been near your mother the night she died. Yes. And you never told me. I was afraid. Of what? That if you knew you'd see Nico differently. I stared at him. How could I? Because Seraphine was already accusing me of abandoning her. If I told you I suspected she was involved in my mother's death, I thought you'd believe our family was dangerous. It is dangerous. He closed his eyes. I know. That evening Priya called. She had discovered that the forged declaration bearing Nico's signature had been submitted by a law firm representing Voss Meridian. The witness stamp from Marabel had been copied. But there was more. The document had been notarized 2 days after Nico had supposedly signed it. The notary was alive. And he was willing to testify. The next morning we met him. His name was Felix Ardent. He looked terrified. I didn't notarize Nico's signature. Then why is your stamp on it? Someone stole my seal. Who? He opened a folder. I reported it. Priya read the report. 3 weeks ago. Felix nodded. Who had access to your office? My assistant. What was her name? Leora Venn. I wrote it down. Then Felix added, she quit the day after the theft. Where did she go? I don't know. Outside Nico suddenly stopped. I know that name. I turned. From where? She worked for Mom. Dorian looked at him. Are you sure? Yes. Nico pulled out his camera. There are pictures from when she visited Northlight. He opened the gallery. There was Leora beside Calder. Then another photograph. Seraphine stood behind them. And on the table between them was the missing notebook. I zoomed in. The torn pages were visible. But something else caught my attention. A document lay underneath them. A handwritten signature was visible at the bottom. Aloan's signature. Dorian looked at the screen. That isn't my mother's handwriting. I stared at him. You're saying the signature is fake? No. He pointed to the screen. The signature is real. Then what is it? His face changed. That is the signature from her original will. Priya took the phone. Why would someone put a genuine signature on a fraudulent document? Nobody answered. Then Nico said quietly, maybe they didn't make the document. We all looked at him. Maybe Grandma did. The room went silent. Because if Aloan herself had prepared that document before her death, then Seraphine and Calder weren't the only people hiding a secret. And suddenly the question wasn't who forged the trust. It was what Aloan had been trying to protect Nico from before she died. The voice behind us sounded like Dorian. I turned toward the darkness. Dorian. The real Dorian was standing beside me. His face had gone white. That isn't me. The footsteps stopped. Then the emergency lights came on. The man was gone. None of us moved. Nico's hand was locked around mine. Priya said, "Everybody stay together." We left the storage facility through the main entrance. Outside rain had started. Dorian looked at me. "I swear I didn't know anyone was using my voice." "I believe you. But you heard it." "I did." Elias was already calling the facility manager. "The footage," he said. "We need a copy." The manager shook his head. "It's gone." The system was remotely wiped. Someone had planned this. And whoever it was knew exactly where we would be. On the drive back to Providence, Dorian finally told us about his brother, Cashin Vale, who had died 22 years earlier in a boating accident. "Why did you say you recognized him?" "The jacket. The posture. The way he walked. Could he have survived?" "I identified his body." Nico was silent. Then he asked, "Why would someone pretend to be Uncle Cashin?" Dorian looked at me. "To make me look guilty." Priya nodded. The next morning she arranged for a digital forensic specialist named Renzo Hale to examine the anonymous messages. He worked from a small office in Hartford. Renzo connected my phone to his system. "Your messages were sent through a relay. Can you trace it?" "Not directly. But they made one mistake." "What?" "They used the same relay for the fake custody evidence." Priya leaned forward. "Can you identify it?" "Give me a few hours." While he worked, Nico and I waited downstairs. He looked exhausted. "Do you think my family is dangerous?" "I think someone is trying to turn your family against itself." "That sounds worse." "It is." He looked at me. "Are you going to leave?" The question hurt. "No." "Even if Mom keeps accusing you?" "Yes." "Even if Dad lied?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because leaving when things get difficult would prove the wrong person right." He smiled faintly. "That's something Grandma would say." Then he looked up. "She used to say, 'Check the frame before you check the picture.'" I remembered the photograph from Northlight. The frame. Not the picture. We returned to the studio. Nico immediately went to his grandmother's old gallery wall. There were 12 framed photographs. He touched the third one. "This one." We removed it. Behind the frame was a thin envelope. Inside was a flash drive. Priya called Renzo. He arrived within an hour. The drive contained one video. Aloan appeared on screen. "If you're watching this, then someone has tried to use Nico's trust." Dorian sat down. "I don't know who will be responsible. I only know that the danger will come from someone who understands our family." Then she said something that shocked all of us. "Dorian, if you are watching this, I'm sorry." Dorian covered his mouth. "I knew you would think I was protecting you." "I wasn't. I was protecting Nico." Aloan explained that she had discovered fraudulent transfers connected to Northlight. Calder was not acting alone. Someone inside the family had provided him with private trust documents. The video ended with one instruction. "Find the ledger before Seraphine does." The screen went black. Nico whispered, "What ledger?" Renzo examined the drive. "There may be another file." He recovered a deleted folder. Inside was a scan page. A list of payments. Names appeared beside amounts. Calder Rusk, Leora Venn, Seraphine Voss. And then another name. Dorian Vale. Dorian stood. "No." Priya studied the entry. The payment beside Dorian's name was enormous. "I never received that money." Renzo looked at the date. "It was deposited into an account." Dorian stared at the number. "That account isn't mine." "Whose is it?" "My brother's." Everyone went silent. Cashin's supposedly closed account had received the payment 21 years after his death. That was impossible. Unless the account had never been closed. Renzo searched the records. "I found the account holder." "Who?" He looked at Dorian. "Cashin Vale." Dorian shook his head. "My brother is dead." Renzo turned the monitor toward us. "The account was accessed yesterday." My blood ran cold. Who? Renzo pointed to the location. Providence. Someone using Cashin Vale's identity was operating less than 10 miles from our house. That afternoon a package arrived for Nico. There was no return address. Inside was a small camera. He recognized it immediately. My grandmother's. A note was attached. You have until midnight. Nico looked at me. For what? The second line answered. Bring Alessia to Northlight. Dorian grabbed the note. No. His phone rang. He answered. Nobody spoke. Then a live voice came through. Sounded exactly like Dorian. Bring your wife to Northlight, or Nico learns what really happened to his grandmother. Dorian looked at me. I don't want you going. I know. Nico stood between us. I know what they want. We turned toward him. They want us separated. He held up his grandmother's camera. So we shouldn't give them that. At 11:30 that night we arrived at Northlight. Priya had arranged for police to watch the building from a distance, so we stayed in the car. At 11:58 the studio lights turned on. A figure appeared behind the upstairs window. Then the front door opened. A man stepped outside. Dorian stared at him. His face drained of color. Cashin. The man looked directly at our car and smiled. And beside him stood Seraphine. But the person holding the ledger wasn't either of them. It was Leora Venn holding the book toward the window. Then she mouthed 4 words. Ask Dorian what he did. Dorian stopped breathing. Nico turned toward his father. Dad. Dorian closed his eyes. And when he finally spoke his voice was barely audible. I was there the night your grandmother died.